Welcome back, ladies. We're back with another podcast, which I am super, super excited to talk to you about, actually, because this has got to be up there with one of the most popular questions that I always get asked, or maybe comments around, is my cholesterol too high? But I am here to break down cholesterol, just like I broke down all the thyroid and the iron stuff. I'm going to tell you something really, really important. So listen up, ladies. If your doctor has just called you and said, hey, your cholesterol's high, and they're writing a script for statins right before you've even had a chance to question them about your cholesterol. But here's what they're also not telling you. 50% of people who have heart attacks actually have cholesterol within the normal reference ranges. Statins, well, they block the production of cholesterol that the brain actually needs as you age, and the real markers of heart disease aren't actually being considered or even tested correctly. Trying to lower your low-density lipids with medication might actually be putting you closer to cognitive decline as we age than you realize. Hey guys, I'm Carla Gallagher. Yep, the Metabolic Alchemist. I'm breaking down cholesterol. One of the leading experts in cholesterol has some interesting facts that I am going to break down with you. He's done the research that backs up everything that we've been saying for years in this naturopathic world of ours. And I'm going to show you why everything you've been told about cholesterol is wrong. What's actually causing heart disease and why statins might be doing more harm than good. And this episode, guys, is one that you want to share wide, especially for you that have cholesterol. All right. Let me paint the picture. You're a woman, probably over 40, maybe 50. You go in for your routine blood work and your doctor calls you back in and says, hey, look, your cholesterol's high. We need to talk about getting on those statins pretty soon. And with, the family history of heart disease, I think you need to be on it. And you're like, hang on, what? I'm actually eating really healthy and I exercise. And apart from maybe my weight not being fantastic, which we all comment on, I don't understand. I don't understand why my cholesterol's high. And what you get back are things like, well, with your family history of heart disease, you're high risk, and statins going to lower the risk of heart attack. And therefore, hang on a second. Let's pause right here. Family history of heart disease. Of course you've got a family history of heart disease. Literally everyone in the bloody world has got a genetic link to heart disease. It's the number one cause of death globally. I would be remiss if I came across somebody who didn't have a link to heart disease in their family tree. Anyway, I wonder what could have caused this number one killer. Could it be maybe that the government had our food pyramid upside down for decades, pushing low-fat diet for 50 years, high carb? Could it be the high stress that our whole society is accepting? Hang on. Let me go back to the story. So you start taking statins because that's what the doctor said, and within weeks you're experiencing brain fog, muscle aches, weakness, fatigue. You can't remember simple things. Your weight might have gone up. But hang on, that's normal. The benefits outweigh the side effects, guys. Just, keep taking your statins and be quiet. Okay, I'm being rude here. But here's what they're not telling you, guys. Your brain is 60% fat. It literally needs cholesterol to function. By blocking cholesterol production with statins, you're essentially starving your brain. Does that sound like a really good way of managing the later years of your life? Starving a brain of vital fats that it needs to keep you alert and active and enjoying life. Meanwhile, those numbers they're obsessing about, the total cholesterol and the low density lipids, they're not even really the right markers that they should be looking at anyway. Today, I'm going to cover and break it all down for you guys. I've got a handy link in the show notes. What are the real markers? What are the real reference ranges? And exactly how can you get healthy and avoid any risk to a heart attack because it's in your family history? All right. Let's break down low density lipids. That's the one called LDL. Here's the story that they tell you about cholesterol. Cholesterol is like grease in a pipe. If it gets clogged, high cholesterol is causing it, and then you're going to die of a heart attack. Okay, it's very simple, it's visual, and it's pretty much effective at scaring the shit out of you, but it's actually fundamentally really wrong. What cholesterol actually does is it's made by our body. 80% of it is actually made every single day because your body can't live without cholesterol. Cholesterol is essential for our cell membranes. Every cell in our body requires cholesterol. All of our sex hormones, I'm talking estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, they're all requiring cholesterol to be made. Hello, brain function. 25% actually goes directly to our brain. Vitamin D production. Hello, we all need vitamin D, guys. It's our immune defense. Bile acids. This is the stuff that we need to break down and digest fats in our food. Guess what? It needs cholesterol. That's a paradox. Fat needs fat in order to be digested. So why would your body be making something that's trying to kill you? It doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Does that make sense? I'm making 80% of the thing that my body is telling me I'm going to die of. Hang on. This is not true, guys. Okay, let's talk about particle size. So when your doctor sees LDL, low density lipids, and say it's up at around 5 or 6, which is like crazy high, they're seeing one number. But that number tells you nothing really about the type of low density lipid you have. There is fluffy ones. They're large and they're like big beach balls, and they're too large to penetrate any artery wall, and generally they are harmless, right? They're associated with metabolic health. I'll come back to that, right? So having lots of big, high, fluffy LDLs actually are healthy. Right, let's go to the small ones. Right, these are tiny ball bearings. They're small enough to bury themselves in an artery wall. And yes, these ones are the dangerous ones, and they're associated with higher insulin resistance. That's that word again. I keep talking about insulin resistance, and I'm going to come back to that one as well. So your standard test of lipids in your panel cannot tell you the difference between big fluffy beach balls and small ball bearing LDLs, right? We can test that through other mechanisms, but just looking at that one number is not going to tell you anything about the size of the particle. Now, the real chain of events that are causing heart disease isn't in fact cholesterol. It's actually caused by insulin resistance and, there I said it, inflammation, another word that I say a lot in my podcast, right? So insulin resistance develops when we have either a higher carbohydrate, can be healthy carbohydrates, or sugar diet, chronically elevated insulin. Now, cells become resistant to this insulin, and here's something critical for every woman over 40. As I've discussed in previous episodes, perimenopause itself causes insulin resistance. The hormone cascade, dropping sex hormones with rising cortisol, creates insulin resistance, and this means you gain more fat around your belly during menopause years. Go back to my other podcast and listen to that. All right. Now, the small, dense LDLs, well, insulin resistance triggers the liver to make more of those LDL particles, right? When we have higher insulin resistance, we create more of those. Our other lipid, triglyceride, goes up, and our healthy HDL marker, the one that they say we've got to have more focus of, goes actually down, all because of insulin resistance. The other thing that's causing heart disease is inflammation. Now, inflammation oxidizes low-density lipids. What does oxidize mean? Well, it basically creates bad particles, right? I sound like the hydrogen collider. Chronic inflammation creates oxidative stress. That oxidizes those little low-density particles that creates like a rusting effect. And that oxidization, that turning that fat bad, triggers an immune response. That is what chronic inflammation is. It's an immune response. We can measure it in our blood tests, which is also in the guidebook I'm going to tell you about. So how does plaque build? Well, white blood cells trying to mop up all this oxidized low-density lipid, they get stuck in the artery walls, and that creates atherosclerosis. So the LDL was just doing its job. Insulin resistance and inflammation came along, and it created the problem. Let me say that again. LDL was okay until insulin resistance and inflammation came along. Well, don't throw LDL out with the bathwater, guys. We need this LDL. We should come up with a little handbag with LDL on it. A bit like Yves Saint Laurent. What do you reckon? All right. I'm sidetracking. I'm getting into fashion. Remember the thyroid podcast a few episodes ago? Well, this really just highlights a very similar misdiagnosis or misinterpretation of the results. Remember the same thing that they do with thyroid when they just look at TSH as a main marker, they're doing with cholesterol. Remember, the doctor looks at TSH and says, oh, that looks normal, dismissing your exhaustion, your metabolic nightmare where you look at anything and you put weight on, the fact that nothing works. They never test your T3. They never test your reverse T3. They never look at the ratio of those. They never interpret that as, hang on a second, actually the thyroid isn't working properly. All the while, you're symptomatic and you're totally dismissed. This is happening with cholesterol too, guys. It's exactly the same. They look at total cholesterol and low-density lipids, and they miss the actual markers that predict heart disease. You can't just look at one number. You have to look under the hood, right? So if total cholesterol and low-density lipids don't predict heart disease, then what actually does? All right, let's break it down. What actually does predict heart disease? And this is going to come into Dr. Bikman's core research around the 4 markers driving heart disease and the risk of heart attack. Okay, marker number 1, triglycerides to HDL ratio. Okay, this is mathematics. So if you're taking statins or you've been avoiding healthy fats in your diet, your brain is starving and maths might be a little bit difficult. But let's break it down. We get a calculator and we get our triglyceride score. We divide it by the HDL score, and that will tell us exactly how insulin resistant we are. Below 2, good. You've got no problem. Above 2, Houston, we have a problem. We have got insulin resistance. So that's simple. This ratio tells you whether you either are insulin resistant or whether you've got low density lipids that are dangerous and you need to make some changes. Okay, marker number 2, this is called CRP. And CRP is a marker for inflammation. Okay, so if we look at our reference ranges, below 1, this shows if inflammation is oxidizing your low-density lipids. And even with a really high LDL, if your CRP is low, below 1, guess what? You're okay. Safe. Tick. All right. If it's above 1 and climbing, and you've got high low-density lipids, we're starting to get into risk factors, and we need to start looking at what is driving inflammation. More about that later. All right. Marker number 3. Fasting insulin. We want to be below 10. Have a look at the reference guide for all the units of measure. I'm just going to mention the numbers here. Now, this one is an important one to test, and pretty much no doctor runs fasting insulin. It's really, really annoying. But I want you to try and advocate for yourself, guys. It is an important marker. It appears years and years before it appears in our blood sugar. Okay, so high insulin drives small low-density lipids, those ones that get oxidized, and also fat storage around the middle. Yikes, we don't want that one, do we? All right, marker number 4, HbA1c. Okay, so this one, luckily a lot of doctors are running quite standard these days. We want to be below 5.7, okay? Ideally below 5.5. The better you are with your diet, guess what? The number goes lower. So this shows your average blood sugar ratio over a 3-month period. And I want to just reference one other marker. It's not in Dr. Bikman's research, but homocysteine is another one that potentially doctors are running. Ideally, you want to be below 10. And look, this is not really a marker for heart disease, more a reference to maybe a deficiency in some of your B vitamins. But I know that it's a common one that some of your doctors run when they're looking at your lipids. Okay, so for more detailed interpretation of all of those markers, I've popped it in the guide in the show notes. So jump in there and print that out and be across the numbers, okay? So what I want to talk about really is the research now. The research that proves this is UCLA did a study of 190,000 heart attack patients, and the finding was 75% had low density lipids within standard reference ranges. Let me say that again. 75% had normal low density lipids. Hang on, I thought that low density lipids caused heart attacks. Guess what else that study suggested? 50% had total cholesterol considered healthy. So hang on, 190,000 heart attack patients in this study had lab results that looked normal. But guess what they had instead? They had high triglycerides to high density lipid ratios. Remember that triglycerides divided by high density lipids? Guess what? They were high. They also had elevated CRP levels, so elevated inflammatory markers. So the cholesterol numbers lied. The metabolic markers, they're the ones that told the truth. Okay, so let's talk about Mum's story. And this illustrates something really important, that cholesterol is actually very adaptive. It's not really a disease. There was a study that some of you might have read. It's called the Oreo study. And it was a fantastic study, actually, by Dr. Nicholas Norwitz, which was done in 2024. So not a long time ago. Actually, this is quite a recent study in the grand scheme of research. He was, or maybe still is, a Harvard medical student with a PhD in metabolism. He also was an elite athlete, or maybe still is. And he discovered what he has now called the lean mass hyper responder. And this is very low body fat, high muscle mass, eating a very low carb keto diet, and his triglycerides, because of his exercise and his way of living and his diet, they were really, really low, and his high density lipids were high. So he had a ratio of triglycerides to high density lipids below 1. So that's like major tick, right? So why, when you have very low carb intake, very low body fat, very high energy demands, because he was an athlete, does your liver produce massive amounts of low density lipids? Well, because they use it as a fuel source, okay? This is not your body trying to kill you. It's actually providing a fuel source. He did a study when he added 100 grams of carbs to his keto diet. Most people would say that's a moderate carbohydrate load. And a lot of it came from eating Oreos, hence the name of the study. His low density lipids actually dropped 71% in 16 days, actually. So let's talk about this. Higher carbohydrates actually lowered low density lipids. So what this shows is that cholesterol responds to metabolic states. It doesn't necessarily explain whether it's a problem because you're insulin resistant or it's being adaptive because you're an athlete. It's telling us that it has a direct correlation with metabolic states, with food in particular. So Mum's story, let's go back to Mum. Real world story. Our whole family, surprisingly, or maybe not, has heart disease. Her mother died of a heart attack 69. Her sister, Mum's auntie, died of a heart attack age 69. Their grandmother died of a heart attack age 69. Now, all three came from poverty. We're talking war babies, struggling to survive, ended up in orphanages. Now, back then, food was pretty simple, okay? You grew it, you ate it. There wasn't, a lot of chemicals and stuff like that. But guess what? they all had significant stresses. Now, we don't have their lipid panels to go and have a look at it and do deep analysis. We just know that they died of heart attacks age 69. And we know that there was a lot of stress in their life. Now, look at my mum's cholesterol. Yes, mum gave me approval to tell you what her panel is. Mum's cholesterol is 8, total cholesterol 8. Her low density lipids are above 5. Now, every single doctor that she's ever seen, and these levels have been consistent for the last 10 years, every single doctor says you need to be on statins. High risk, family history, your total cholesterol and your low density lipids are well over normal reference ranges. But here's what they're not talking about. Mum's triglycerides, well, they're below 1. I know. And her high density lipids, guess what? They're around 2. Her triglyceride to high density lipid ratio is below 1. Excellent. Guess what? She even said, prove it. Do a calcium score, test everything. 74 years old, she's running on a treadmill, doing stress tests and measuring calcium scores. And guess what? They're 0. She's got absolutely no plaquing. Despite the high cholesterol, despite the high low density lipids, guess what else? She was an elite athlete. So in her younger years, she's developed a way that her body uses low density lipids, produces more of it for her fuel source, because that is how she's built her body, how she's built her metabolism. Now, mum doesn't need statins, and she's not going on them ever, because she's metabolically healthy and her lipids tell the truth. Now, her high low density lipid is just like Dr. Nortzwitz in the Oreo study. It's her body being efficient. And guess what? At age 74, she has surpassed her own family's history of heart disease. The difference, not her low density lipids, it was her triglycerides and high density lipid ratio. Her inflammation markers were 0, and her metabolic health is top notch. This is why you can't just look at the low density numbers in isolation. You need context. So how do statins work? They block an enzyme in your liver, and this enzyme creates cholesterol, right? So it blocks the enzyme, meaning you get less cholesterol, meaning you lower your numbers on the blood test. Except your body needs that cholesterol, right, to fuel the brain. So you're starving your brain that needs 60% of the fat contained in that cholesterol. And cholesterol in your brain is essential for myelin production. So the myelin sheath, this is 70% of myelin is cholesterol. Without it, guess what? Your signals around your body become slower. Brain fog, slower thinking, memory issues, dementia, Alzheimer's. Neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, all depend on cholesterol. This means happy hormones. Without cholesterol, we aren't happy. As women over 40, guess what else? Our estrogen declines. It already affects our brain function. Perimenopause also affects our brain function. We're at a higher risk of cognitive decline already with our dropping of our hormones. The last thing we need is to also drop our cholesterol levels. We desperately need that cholesterol for our brain. Problem number 2, the dementia connection. All right. So there's multiple studies linking statins to cognitive decline. The Women's Health Initiative, they said statin users have significantly increased higher risk of cognitive decline. The Framingham Heart Study, lower cholesterol equals worse cognitive function in older adults. The US UCSD study, memory loss, confusion, often resolved when statins are stopped. The studies are endless. The mechanism makes clear sense because the brain needs cholesterol. Put statin in, you lower your brain function. All right. Are we preventing heart attacks in our 60s only to develop cognitive decline in our 70s, 80s, and 90s? What a conundrum, right? Okay, all of our sex hormones, guess what, are made from cholesterol. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all. I've talked about this. As we get into menopause, we drop those. Then you throw a statin in there, it's going to drop it even further. For women over 40, this is problematic, right? Over 50, even more problematic. We still need some of those hormones. We don't want to block the little bit that we have. It's not the right way to look at it. We need to look at the drivers, look at the bottom up, okay? So how do we fix this problem? I know we're getting to the end of this, guys. Guess what? My whole methodology is not only fixing metabolic weight, it's actually fixing our whole brain function. It's fixing insulin resistance. It's actually protecting you against heart disease and heart attacks. And we do this by reducing inflammation. How do we do this, right? So one of the foundations of my whole metabolic principle is about fixing the gut, fixing the foundation, okay? 70% of your immune system lives in the gut. You have leaky gut, food particles get into the bloodstream, create massive inflammation. So the approach is we're going to eliminate all the things that create inflammation and create a leaky gut. Gluten, cow's milk, dairy, seed oils in pretty much everything. You've got to be really selective. Processed foods. We need to heal the gut. We need to use bone broths, collagen, things that heal the gut. Herbs, fermented foods, all of this supports the health of the microbiome. Digestive enzymes, apple cider vinegar, all these nice fermented things increase enzymes, increase digestion, fix leaky guts, right? Number 2, we need to restore insulin sensitivity, right? So remember, this means either a small, dense, low-density lipid or a nice, large, dense, low-density lipid. Guess what? The fluffier, the better, okay? So if we keep our carbs in a Goldilocks zone, this means 60 to 80 grams a day, increasing healthy fats because that's what we have left on the plate. If we make the heroes of our plate more fats and proteins and less of the carbohydrates, and especially less of the inflammatory ones, guess what? We actually increase our high-density lipids and lower our triglycerides, which means that ratio is spot on. Yeah, you might have nice, big, fluffy LDL particles driving up that lipid result, but your triglycerides and your high-density lipid ratio is going to be spot on, all from keeping in the Goldilocks zone. Now, what about exercise? Over-exercising, guess what? It's going to increase inflammation. What happens when we have high inflammation? We get worsening insulin resistance. That all leads to smaller, denser, low-density lipid particles. Worse for heart issues, right? So we want to be smart. My whole methodology is around rest. We work hard in our 15-minute workouts, and then rest of the time, we're using yoga and breath work and resting our body so that we're not creating more stress on it, not creating more inflammation. We're dampening all that down. So let's move properly. Let's move in the right way. What about our sleep? Sleep is another one. Poor sleep, more insulin resistance. That means inflammation. That means small, dense ball bearings in our arteries. So let's get more sleep, guys. The research shows that over 7 hours of sleep a day reduces inflammation. So get to bed by 10, guys. That is a big one. Go back to my sleep podcast and learn more about that. All right, let's wrap it up, guys. I hope now that you know cholesterol is not our enemy. It's actually essential for our whole function of our body, our hormones, our cell function, our neurotransmitters, our happiness, our ability to burn fat and fit into clothes. It's not about low density lipids at all. Heart disease comes from inflammation and insulin resistance, not cholesterol. 50% of heart attack patients had normal cholesterol levels. Go back, look at the research, look at the right markers. Statins also, they block your body's ability to produce cholesterol. That is not an answer for preventing heart disease. Preventing heart disease comes from treating insulin resistance, that's through diet and the other mechanisms I've talked about, and reducing inflammation. So resting our body more, knowing which foods to eat, all of that is essential. This is what I teach. We're doing actual heart attack prevention. And we're losing weight and having energy on the backside of that too. And my mum's story proves it, right? High cholesterol, excellent ratios, 0 calcium scores, age 74, thriving, no heart disease, despite having a family history of it. The answer isn't in statins. It's fixing your gut. So from here, download my comprehensive guide. Request all of those markers in your next panel from your GP, do the math yourself. Guess what? You can be healthy, vibrant, and metabolically healthy, all by doing things within your control. Diet, exercise, rest, sleep, all of these are things that you own. You own the outcome. And I hope this helps you understand it a whole lot better. Remember, if you have a friend with cholesterol issues and or statins, send this podcast to them. Make sure you like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for all the updates, for all podcasts coming out. And if you're ready to really change, jump into my programs. That's all there for you, as well as coaching if you need it. So that's it from me. Hopefully this has opened your eyes. I look forward to speaking to you soon. And that's a wrap. Phew. If something clicked for you today, I've got all the links to my favourite products, supplements, and exactly where to buy them waiting for you in the show notes. No hunting required. Want more personalised support? I totally get it. This journey can be overwhelming when you're doing it all on your own. Whether you're ready to jump into my one-on-one coaching programs or test it out first in my online metabolic flash course, I've got your back. Just head to the show notes for the links to those pages or my website inner-alchemy.com.au and let's turn those frustrating symptoms into your comeback story. Because honestly, the best version of you isn't in your past. She's waiting on the other side of these new rules. Until next time, remember, work smarter, not harder. Thanks for sticking around. I'll see you in the next episode.